Good morning. I am Linda Hadley, and I'm the Dean of the Turner College of Business, and I want to say welcome to all of you and to thank you for being here. This is the final installment of this spring's Executive Speaker Series. And I'm just curious, I'd like to know how many of you, by show of hands, how many of you are business students in the Turner College? Okay, and how many of you are computer science students in the Turner College? Okay, just curious, I thought it would be helpful for us to have some context for the audience, because it seemed to me that most of you were computer science students. Well, I want to say thank you all for being here. It's the Executive Speaker Series. We tend to have 4 each semester, and we try to select some of the leading professionals, leading executives, and leading entrepreneurs in their field who will come in and share with our students. What we ask them to do is to share freely. We give them full reign to talk about whatever they'd like, but we often tell them that one of the things that students really enjoy hearing about is to hear about their career progression. Because I know that some of you who are sitting in here this morning are thinking, I'm 21 years old, 22 years old, have a part-time job, maybe even, in fast food or retail or whatever, and have no idea how I'm going to get to where I want to be. And so some of the best feedback that we've gotten from students is that they've shared how much they've enjoyed hearing the career progression, the stories of how they got to where they are. Well, we're very fortunate today to have an outstanding executive who is going to speak to you today. I'm going to ask Dr. Wayne Summers, who is the chair of the TISA School of Computer Science, to make the formal introduction.
Thank you, Dr. Hadley. Good morning. Good morning. We're really pleased this morning to have with us Mr. Tim Callahan. He's the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer for Aflac. He's been working in the field of computer security and cybersecurity for about 30 years. Came to us he was with Aflac, came to Aflac from SunTrust and People's Bank before that. Has served his time in the Air Force for 23 years as a degree from University
University of State of New York.
Yeah, there's State University of New York, and this is the University of State of New York in Albany. And we're really thrilled to hear what you can share with us from your experiences in cybersecurity. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I certainly like working a little bit that I've been able to with CSU. I appreciate the creation of the cybersecurity program. That's a skill that you probably all know is in a very short supply right now. I've heard all kinds of estimates, but anywhere from 1.5 to 2 million vacant positions, and we're always looking to encourage people to pursue that area when things match up, their personalities match up, when their skills and their desire, which is probably the most important part. Between the government hiring many cybersecurity experts, private industry, especially in the financial sector, having to build programs, we really do need people to pursue that. Now, I'm not going to talk about, that's about all I'll do for that commercial, but if at any point you find that you want to pursue that, let me know. I'm happy to talk to you. I'm here in Columbus most of the time, or at least part of the time, but I'm always happy to talk to students about their career goals and the benefits of being in cybersecurity. But having said that, I'm going to kind of talk more about kind of how I got here, So if I was going to write a book, it would probably be how I did it, But I'm going to give you the short version. you can buy the book later once I write it. But the very short version is, and who I am. Well, I'm currently married. I have 2 daughters. They're both, were military brats, if we have any of those in the audience. But they really enjoyed being able to move around, as I would go to different assignments and experience different things. We spent quite a bit of time in Germany. The girls were pretty young at the time, but had the opportunity to be in New Mexico and for a while in Maryland, and then my terminal assignment was at Headquarters Air Mobility Command in Illinois. But both of my daughters are married, and I have 2 grandsons, which are kind of pictured here. The little guys there, and we just found out the other day that I'm going to have a granddaughter. My youngest is expecting, and we're very happy about this. I'm sure this will be my last grandchild, and we really, my wife and I, and in fact my daughter Crystal really was wanting a girl, so she found out that that's what we're going to have. And of course, my dog Charlie fits into my life. Charlie takes a lot of care and feeding, so to speak. Charlie goes to school too. Every day I drop him off at doggy daycare, and they try to teach him. He's about 2 years old. He's still kind of in that adolescent stage, but he brings us all a lot of pleasure. I guess my primary home is in Fayetteville, Georgia. I have an apartment in Columbus here that my wife and I stay in during the week and get to go home on the weekend. Charlie stays with us, but we get to go see our grandchildren every weekend. So before I get more deeply in a career, let me tell you a little bit about my life, my early life. I was actually born in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was born in what was known as Georgia Baptist Hospital at the time. It's now called Atlanta Medical Center. But a very quick, interesting fact, my great-great-uncle was a gentleman named Dr. Lynn Broughton. Dr. Broughton, he did 2 things. He founded 2 things. Although he was a medical doctor, he received the call to the ministry, and he became a pastor, and he found the Atlanta Baptist Tabernacle, which now it's called the Tabernacle, and it's actually a venue for music and shows. But he also was instrumental in founding Georgia Baptist Hospital. At the time, the Georgia Baptists were, very concerned about care, and there was little care in the community at the time, so they founded the hospital, and in order to take care of the community, and of course it grew to be quite a large hospital. And actually the Baptists only divested it about 10 years ago. With the current medical care issues, they felt like that was the wrong business to be in, so they actually sold the property. But anyway, I grew up in East Point, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta. My father, kind of early in my life, was an insurance agent. He went around and sold insurance door to door. He also had a brokerage, and he also left that business and owned a contract cleaning business in this city of Atlanta. All of that figures in, and I'll tie it all together pretty soon. But I did, before I started, cyber crime and prevent the criminals, I was busy fighting my sisters, because I have 1 brother and 3 sisters, and it seemed like I was very mischievous. I would pull their hair or tease them unmercifully. So that was the environment we grew up in. We were actually a very close family, but brothers and sisters have their little rivalries, and certainly I was no exception to that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the building blocks that kind of led me where I am today. As I mentioned, my father was an insurance agent, And when I was young, probably 5, 6 years old, he would actually take me to visit customers, whether, at their houses and stuff. And, I really don't know what his true motivation is to do that. But what I benefited out of that is learning a lot of skills. So what I would do is, as he was giving the presentation, and he saw life insurance, I would flip the slides for him on his little projector, and it would tell these tear-jerking stories about, fathers of houses, or fathers of families. If they died and they didn't have insurance, then the family lost the house. And if they did have insurance, everything turned out better because of that. So, I mean, it was, I'm listening to this at 5 or 6 years old, and so it really taught me a couple of things out of that experience. One thing was, how to communicate, really how to sell, I guess, how to negotiate, how to pass on information. But, in the insurance business, it's not really a hard sell like other types of business. What it is more of a consulting kind of business. And so it really taught me to really understand people's needs, their passions, and to how to help them, in achieving those goals. So, that's something that really became very important later on in my life, and actually throughout my life. Another lesson I learned from that was just the lesson of hard work and work ethic. Go to work, rather than just kind of staying at home. Later on, I worked for my father again, when he went into the cleaning business. So, again, by this time I was older, probably 10, 11, 12, something like that, when he started his company. And I watched how he operated his business, so I learned kind of business skills from that. I also learned negotiating, again, with clients as he would pitch and build contracts. I learned how to, create a contract, create a proposal, and present it to them. And I do know that, as you start building your career, as you start looking at things, you really need to understand your strengths and play to your strengths. There's no saying that, you always know your weaknesses, but you play to your strengths, right? And the reason you want to know your weaknesses is, one, to try to overcome them, if possible, and two, if you don't know your weaknesses, I guarantee you other people do. And if other people do, and you don't know them, then, you have a blind side. But if you know your weaknesses, especially as you go up into the, business world or whatever, you can get people to come alongside you and have their strengths offset your weaknesses. And that's something very important. Again, when you're building a team, you always want to build it in a way that you're full, you see the full picture, know what the requirements are, and if you don't have the requirements in a particular area, make sure that you have someone on your team that can fill that out. And that's a lesson that I've learned throughout my career. When you think about and you take inventory, don't forget those experiences in life. You may not have had a formal job that did a particular thing, but think through your experiences in life and see how those experiences can translate into a particular skill or business, something that employers would want. Another thing, is the unknown. So, a bit back to my early life. After I worked for my father, I graduated high school. I kind of went to college for a while up in Kentucky. There was a private school called Cumberland College. I went there for a little bit, but really felt like I was kind of wasting my time. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was, very unhappy with kind of the academic world at that particular time. I later grew to love it, but at that particular time, I had been in school, all my life, and I felt like I wanted some freedom. So I quit school. I got a job. My father still had the company, but I actually decided I wanted to pursue other things. So I got a job at a car dealership, and initially as a lot guy. So my responsibility was every day go to the used car lot and make sure all the cars would run, because there's nothing more embarrassing to be showing a car and it wouldn't run. So I did that. For an 18-year-old, it was actually pretty exciting to be able to set in all these cars that I couldn't afford, but I could drive. And so I did that for a while, and then actually went into car sales. I did that for a while, and I learned a valuable lesson there is I didn't want to be in the car sales business. It was fun and exciting. It was one of those things you could make a lot of money one week and nothing the next, and have a good month or have a bad month. And that I just wanted more stability in my life at that particular time. So I decided to go into the Air Force to kind of understand what I wanted to do, to kind of get my head together. I went in, one of the reasons I went in was actually to pursue an education and have the opportunity to use, at that time, the GI Bill. So my intent was really to go in for 4 years. The recruiter actually tried to get me to go in 6 years because there would have been better benefits for both he and I. But I said, no, I'm going to do 4 years and plan to get out. And so when it came to pick a job, he asked me what I wanted to do. And I was very honest with him. It's like, that's why I'm in here, because I don't know what to do. And he said, well, here's some really good jobs that will prepare you for, life after the military. And we went through and found a few of them. I had taken the entry test and pretty much, had scores. I could go into anything I wanted. Most of the jobs, though, there was like a year wait. And it's like, I don't want to wait a year. I want to do this now. Had I wanted to wait a year, I'd just come back in a year. But he said, well, we do have a program. It's called, Go Now. And he said there's right now 3 jobs. And I can't remember what the other 2 jobs right offhand, but the one that really caught my attention was something called explosive ordnance disposal. And he read the description of it, and it sounded exciting. So I said, I'm 18 years old, right? I'm fearless, I'm invincible, so I can go do that. So I went off to EOD school and learned all kinds of valuable lessons being, an EOD guy. It's one of those jobs that I found after I got through training, and by the way, the training was very rigorous. The first phase of the school I went to was over in Huntsville, Alabama at Redstone Arsenal, and it was the chemical school. And that's where we went through our chemical portion, learning all the chemical weapons and learning all the, how to tell it's a chemical weapon without touching it and starting to shake like a bug. You kind of want to learn before you do that. So I learned that. One of the, we had very old chemical suits at the time. The military, again, I was post-Vietnam. The military hadn't updated their chemical gear since World War II. So you could imagine we're in some pretty old stuff. And we had this one mask that every time I'd put it on, it hurt. It really hurt. And so, we being very innovative and thinking, I found a way to kind of, hold my chin where it actually cracked the seal of the mask, but, it was training, right? One day I go out and we're doing training, and they have a little pigeon in a cage, and the pigeon died. It started flopping around and died. I didn't crack my mask anymore after that, because I learned the lesson that, that mask was there to protect me. And, again, this started my career in learning risk management, right? What was the penalty? What was the reward? Well, before there was nerve agent there, the reward was my mask was more comfortable by cracking the seal, and working that. Once I saw the penalty that, oh my God, if I crack the seal, that nerve gas is going to get me, obviously my reward was different, or my penalty was different. So I wore the mask properly from then on. I learned a lot of skills, as I went into and learned more about the explosives. From there, I went to a Navy school, the Naval School of EOD, which is in Indian Head, Maryland. And by the way, the Navy runs the whole EOD program for all the Department of Defense, so we kind of had to go to their school. And, very early in my career, I still didn't know how to be in the Air Force, and I'm landing on an Army base, then landing on a Navy base. And that was quite an experience, because I went to the reception desk, which I learned was called a quarterdeck. And at the quarterdeck, they told me to get to the Air Force liaison office, I had to go down a passageway, up a ladder, and down another passageway, and go to the port side. And it was like, what? So I'm going to be crawling through some tunnel or something? And I learned that the Navy calls halls. The Navy really thinks they're on ships all the time. And so everything is named after a ship. And so I had to learn that language too, while I'm still trying to learn how to be in the military and how to be in the Air Force. So at any rate, I graduated EOD school, and off I went into my career. It was, to me, it's very valuable, and certainly I could tell you all kinds of stories of excitement. One thing, I saw the military change quite a bit through the years, especially when the wall came down. We had always, and by that time I was at a headquarters position and was doing military planning, and we always had these scenarios in military planning that we had two major conflicts, right? That was our biggest scenario. So we're fighting two major conflicts at once, and that was the traditional threat back when the wall was up, when there was a Soviet Union, and when there was the satellite countries, and there was the Iron Curtain, across Berlin. We always thought in the concept of two major conflicts, and so after the wall came down, the whole military had to shift its way of thinking. And so we started, learning from military strategists, which, again, I don't know if that's an oxymoron or what, but at any rate, the military planners, they started introducing things like low-intensity conflict, mid-intensity conflict, and major regional war. And so our planning had to change. But I will tell you, I've struggled with a low-intensity conflict, because when bullets are coming your way, it's pretty intense. I don't care what they call it. But the low intensity, we started getting involved in a whole lot of small conflicts. I guess when the Soviet Union broke up, there was a time there that the U.S. could influence more. And we did a lot of more peaceful missions. I could tell you stories about these peaceful missions that, all of a sudden turned intense. But we started doing a lot of that. So we were very busy, even though we didn't have a worldwide threat. But some of the lessons I did learn in EOD, so I went in the field. I was, within an EOD unit, we generally organized as one big unit, probably 20, 25 people or more. In some cases we had 60 people, but we would break up in either 2-man teams or 4-man teams depending on what the threat was, and then we would deploy. It really taught me a lot about planning, thinking ahead, understanding that, if you're going to be going to some place and you didn't know the conditions, you pretty much had with anything that you were going to get for support is what you brought with you. So you have to take a lot of time to think through and learn as much intelligence you can about the environment in order to know what to take with you. Because once you get there, in many cases, especially during this low intensity phase or these small deployment phase, if you didn't have it, you weren't going to get it, or you weren't going to get it soon, in many cases. So it teaches you to think through scenarios and think through what you have to do. It also taught me a lot about risk management. This is the bomb suit, and it was introduced probably after I'd been in about 10 years. So for about 10 years, we didn't have one. When it came out, there was a whole lot of discussion, probably consternation about it, because while the bomb suit would provide some protection, we used to think, well, especially the state of the bomb suits, the biggest benefit is if something blew up, at least the guys didn't have to look for you, in little pieces. You'd be all in one big hunk. You'd still be dead, but you would be easy to find. So it was really for the mortuary guys, more than anything. And that was kind of our philosophy. Because what happened is we learned that, yeah, there's some protection there, but what do you give up? And what we gave up was mobility. And if you kind of look at it from a gradient standpoint, and this is an illustration of the different military uniforms, and actually it came from a slide that I taught risk management using each of the military uniforms to make a point. But if you think about it, the lower left hand slide there is actually what we call the PT uniform, the physical training uniform. And what was it trying to protect? Well, you were trying to protect against the environment. It was generally lighter, more flexible. We had a winter version and a summer version, but the summer version was, t-shirt and shorts and running shoes. And that was the appropriate uniform for that. And then you kind of go up and you have the utility uniform that is, again, what's the purpose for that? And the purpose for that is to protect you from, when you're working in the field or on the flight line or whatever, to protect you from, from the elements there, right? So you've gone up, so you're there exercising, then you're working, and then the next thing you see is helmet and body armor. Not the full bomb suit body armor, but kind of a flak vest kind of situation. And what you're doing there is you're protecting from hostile fire. There's a joke about friendly fire. Friendly fire isn't. It doesn't matter, if it's friendly or hostile, the bullet's the same, but that's to protect you from that. So when you would use that would be a scenario where you needed protection, but you also needed mobility, right, to be able to maneuver around and to, have enough mobility that you could continue the fight or you could continue to operate. And then, of course, the next step up that is the bomb suit. And, I've already talked about the bomb suit, but we did learn in the bomb suit, as more improvements were made to it, it did provide better protection, right? So you went from just being able to keep the corpse together to, yeah, it really will protect me. If you're holding a package in your hand, you might lose your hand, but you would probably survive. And it was made to give better mobility as the suits got better. But the problem is it still weighed 85 pounds. And you know, I'm sure you've got a lot of lifters here that think 85 pounds isn't much, but you strap that sucker on your body and it's a lot. There's actually every year a charity event for the EOD Wounded Warrior or the EOD Foundation where guys run 5K races or whatever in the bomb suit, which, I mean, I could never do that. I mean, these guys that are in now are much tougher, I guess. But, and then ultimately we had a robot. So if the threat was so high that you know, it was very dangerous, we'd send in a robot. And then all of these scenarios were balanced by the environment, right? Or by the weapon. So, you know, if we happen to have a bomb that was by a critical asset, we couldn't use some of these methods, right? We couldn't use, like, the best method that we ever had, regardless of what kind of bomb, except for chemical and nuclear, was to blow it in place, right? What we call blow in place. You take your explosives, you set them down, even maybe with a robot, and you just blow it up, if the environment will let you. But if you're by a critical asset, you know, or a hospital or something that you couldn't evacuate, then you had to do something else, right? And you took more risk then to save that asset. So everything was on this line. And that's a valuable, very valuable lesson that I learned from the Air Force. I left the Air Force and immediately went, my first job out of the Air Force was the SunTrust Bank. That was it. I went to SunTrust Bank. My first job at SunTrust Bank had nothing to do with information security. I was actually, well, it had a little bit, but I actually was hired to create a construction program for retail banks. So basically the branches, the Atlanta Bank, at that time SunTrust was actually 30 different banks, you know, cobbled together, kind of the old Synovus, like Synovus is. But Atlanta had, you know, taken 5 county banks and consolidated into one bank, and they needed someone to oversee the program when they decided to build branches. The way I got that job is when I got out, I was in Illinois when I retired, Belleville and Scott Air Force Base. I had, you know, had a very good career there as a headquarters. It had prepared me for several things. One, it taught me the corporate life, you know, how to, when you're in the headquarters, it's much like working at a corporate environment. You have a lot of civilians, you have a program, you have to learn, you know, how to run your program, budgeting or whatever. So certainly I learned that skill, how to, you know, come up with a budget plan and how to sell that plan. My responsibility at the headquarters was to train, equip, and actually control and assign the EOD teams within our command. And I had about 122 EOD teams. You know, that they were spread out all over the world. And so I had to learn how to gain resources for those teams. So that was a skill I had. I also, we had the EOD program during the shakeup of the Air Force after the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. We had a chief of staff of the Air Force named Merrill McPeak, 4-star general, and he quite creatively had a design for the Air Force in his head. So, you know, I think this is a true story. I was told this is true, that he actually designed the Air Force at a bar one night and wrote it on a bar napkin with his head of personnel. And when you saw the napkin or you saw the layout of the Air Force, it was like, yeah, he had to be on something. But anyway, it reorganized the whole Air Force. The first thing it did is it took 3 major commands and brought them down to 2. So it took the old Strategic Air Command, Military Airlift Command, and the Tactical Air Command, and it combined them into 2 commands. One was the Mobility Command, which I was in, and the other one was the Combat Command, Air Combat Command. But what I learned through that experience was merger and acquisition experience, because as we were negotiating what would go where in the new commands, certainly we had the Tactical Air Command guys were the leaders in pulling out the combat forces out of SAC into TAC. I was concerned with pulling out the mobility forces, or the tankers and carriers and things like that, into MAC. So I learned that skill. Also, after that, the EOD program was put under the civil engineers. That was a shock to me. My particular preference was something else, but I had to learn to, take whatever and make the best of it. Again, know my strengths, embrace the unknown, and take initiative. So I had to get out there and do the best I could, even though I didn't like it. But what I didn't like, going into the civil engineers, became a very big asset to me. So when I got out, if you kind of think through it, there's 3 things I could do that I was qualified for. Because I was in the civil engineers, I had to start learning skills. One of the skills, I had a general that just kind of took me, under his wing, so to speak, the civil engineer for Air Mobility Command. And every time he would go to a military construction review, I would go with him. And he would teach me by example, how you manage a massive military construction program through that. So I acquired those skills, which came in handy when I got out of the Air Force. And I tell that story, the 3 things I could have done is I could have done information security, because I had always been the security officer for our units, and I learned a lot of that. Then I could have gone into construction management, which I did initially, or I could have been a migrant bomb picker and just go all over the world picking up bombs and blowing up bombs. And I elected to pursue a life that didn't involve so much travel. So I went into construction program management. The way I was introduced to that is, here's another valuable lesson. As I told you, my father owned a cleaning company. He had connections all over Atlanta. So while I was looking for something to do, he introduced me to a gentleman. His name was Dick Wasser. You can look him up, he exists. But anyway, Dick, he was actually the general manager for probably the largest cleaning company in the South. And so I interviewed with him, and he said, "Tim, I would hire you right now." He said, I think your skills would be very valuable. I'd be willing to, start you anytime. He says, "But before you do that, I think the world of your father. I know he's a wonderful guy. I want you to do something for me." He says, "I want you to go talk to a guy over at SunTrust. He's looking for someone to come and lead a program, and I think you could do that. And I'd much rather have you go that route than to get kind of wrapped up into our business." Because he said, in our business, you're going to be limited. There's a ceiling before you're going to be there a few years and hit that ceiling. He says, if you go to work for SunTrust, there's a lot more opportunity. So I went and interviewed there and was hired in that program. So again, a few lessons learned. One is make sure that when you write your resume, whatever varied skills you have, make sure you put it on your resume, because Dick actually saw on my resume some of those varied experiences that I had. I had actually some help with the military transition program on how to frame a resume, but I really had to call out and civilianize my skills so that they could be recognized and that's what Dick had seen. He saw that I had these varied skills that would be more valuable at a larger company or a different kind of company, and that's why he recognized that with me. The one thing that if I could give any kind of advice to anyone that's kind of looking is, don't avoid opportunities that's going to give you life experience. There's a gentleman, I'm on the advisory board of a company called Venify, and I'm sure you've never heard of it because, but it manages certificates and encryption keys. But I'm on the board, and the CEO there is a gentleman named Jeff Hudson. And Jeff grew up much differently than I did, but when he was a teenager, he worked on a farm. His grandparents owned a big farm in Northern California. He worked on a farm. He worked in a warehouse. As he was going through college, he waited tables. He, ran a forklift, dump truck, some heavy equipment. He did things just interacting with people. And, he went to college and got his degree in computer engineering. And then he just, went on he worked for IBM for a number of years and then decided, okay, I want to do a startup. He did a startup with a non-security company. It was more of a storage company. He kind of did that, sold it, and then he did another startup that was another security company, kind of built that up, sold that, and now, he's at Venify, which is, dominates the space in his particular field. But I tell you that because he told me that his parents, when that was bringing him up, wanted him to have as much experience and diversified experience as possible. One, so that it would help him know what his passion was and what he really wanted to pursue. But two, this experience will come back to bear in everything you do in life. You draw on what you are. People are what they are because of what they've done and what they've experienced, right? It's social scientists and psychologists and psychiatrists all argue about what's innate and what's learned. It doesn't matter. You can't control what's innate, so why bother? Learn what you can learn and pursue that. And that's kind of the biggest thing. Some of the things that, my leadership principles that I have learned, and I want to pass on a bit of that. I practice a leadership. There's two sciences. One is called situational leadership. So basically that means that you have kind of in your tool bags all methods of leadership, or at least the primary methods. I mean, if you think through that, it's, the autocratic, the democratic, the more the persuasive, and then the laissez-faire. If you kind of think through that, pick a style, but in situational leaderships, you use the right style based on the circumstance and the situation you're in. If you have a very qualified team, you don't need to be autocratic. You let the team, do the work. You set the vision and lead them, make sure they got resources, and you do the work. Servant leadership is kind of an offshoot. It's not within that same vein, but I kind of combine the two because I really believe servant leadership is very important. And basically what servant leadership is making sure that your teams are equipped, they're trained, they're capable of doing the job. Let them do their job and make sure that you serve your team. You don't rule your team, you serve your team to enable them to do their job. And, so it's the concept of coming alongside and encouraging. And, if you see an issue, finding out what the issue is. You don't go in pounding the guy. You go in trying to understand what the issue is, and then you work with that individual to try to help them, be successful. A part of servant leadership is also when you find someone that's not being successful, you find out, is it because we're trying to ask you to do something you either don't have the desire to or you don't have the aptitude for? And, if you discover that, if it becomes a training issue, you can train anybody, right? But you find out the issue, and it may be a desire issue. So the servant leader helps that person find a career or a job that they have a desire for, and it all benefits the team. But, I came to that life lesson, I guess, because in kind of thinking through, failures come, right? And whenever you fail, there's a really good book, it may have been one of John Maxwell's, it's called Failing Forward. So when you fail, and you will fail, no matter what you do, there will come a time where you fail. When I was disarming bombs, we had a motto. It's called initial success or total failure, because you didn't really want to fail then. You didn't learn a lot from your failures then, or the lesson you learned was too expensive. But there will be failures, quite seriously. So when you fail, you have a choice of how to handle that, right? You can give up, or you can learn from it and go on. Some of the best people I've ever met in the business world, or even in the military, have been those people that have failed at something but kept on and persevered through that failure. I mean, the leader, the servant leader especially, tries to help their team. I want the team to, the individuals within the team to feel like that they can fail, and I'm not going to shoot them, right? Because if they fail and they learn, they become so much more valuable. One of the analogies I use is the difference between skinning your knee and breaking your neck. It's my job as a leader not to let you break your neck or to do something fatal, but it's also my job to let you skin your knee. In other words, experience, learn from it, and keep on going. It's very important, in my view. People have to have, especially if you're in any kind of innovative kind of field like technology, you have to have the courage to try things. And you have to be in an environment where you're permitted to do that, so that you can learn from your mistakes and go on. I think it's some of the things that I've seen people react to failure at times very negatively, and that's really when failure becomes a problem. But if you take it, very humble about it, and say, yep, I messed up, let's figure out how not to let that again, it's a very valuable experience. Always ask yourself, what did I learn from that? And I think you'll be much happier. So kind of summing up the career blocks is, understand your strength. Don't be afraid to embrace the unknown. Usually as you go into the unknown, it becomes clearer as you march. Make sure that you don't become paralyzed. So you take initiative. Initiative simply means that you may not have all the answers, but you're going to go directionally in the right direction and adjust as you go. But take the initiative, do something. Don't just wait for perfection. One of the struggles that I have right now, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Japanese culture, but Aflac, 75% of our business is in Japan. I find myself over there a lot because of that. We're building up a really good team. But one of the things I struggle with in the Japanese culture, they want everything answered before they start. And I've been in cybersecurity, in anything, I don't think that's good. But in cybersecurity, while you're waiting, to find out everything, right, the environment's changed, because that's how quickly the criminals are changing their tactics. So what I've been trying to lead them into understanding is you have to start and learn, learn from it, and then adjust your path. You can't know all the answers. But I think that's a very important life. They want to wait till I know everything and do. Well, 18 months have gone by. We can't do that. We need to be open to varied roles. When you join a company, and I've had a lot of people come right out of school, in my career, and oftentimes, they've had in their mind what they think they want to do, and, generally speaking, companies need you to do different things, right? And so you have to be, you have to be open to different roles in different ways. You might want to do this thing, but the company really needs this. If it's within your sphere, go for that. Basically, take what you can get till you can get what you want, right? And that's how you have to go about it and move up. I've known people that went to college, they were intent, I'm going to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And so they pursue all that. I know at least 3 that I met even while I was in Connecticut. They went through school, they went through their residency program, their internship, they became fully licensed and found out they hated being a doctor. They hated working with patients. So even if you think you've got it all wrapped up and you know where you're going, realize that you may get there. There's a young lady that worked with me at SunTrust, worked on my team, that had gone to Georgia Tech to be an architect. And she found out in her 3rd year when she went for her internship, she hated architecture. She had pursued it thinking different, but when she went into an architectural firm, she found out she hated it. She obviously went ahead and got her degree, but then she had to find something that she loved, and actually she became a very good space planner, interior designer. But, what I'm saying is be open. That's the biggest thing. And then be resilient. If you're really going to accomplish anything, you have to keep at it. You've all heard the analogies of how many times Thomas Edison failed before he arrived. And I think anybody, have lived that's accomplished anything. Each failure teaches you something. If you're wise enough to learn from it and you go on, then you'll be successful. So with that, I left a bit of time for questions, if there are any. Yes?
Which of your career blocks do you think helped you the most going from A to B?
I think embracing the unknown. When I started at SunTrust, again, I had the right skills, but when I started at SunTrust, and probably very few people know this. In fact, I know very few people know this. I came into work. They gave me this nice, beautiful office, bookshelves, desk, just, better than I'd ever been in. And I would come in and sit there wondering what to do. It's like they hired me, they expect me to know, and I don't know. So I one day after feeling sorry for myself for about a week, of doing this, I just said, I'm going to find something to do. And so I went around and started asking questions and meeting people. But I think embracing the unknown, it can be scary depending on the risk, but I think it's it makes life exciting too. I mean, we don't want lives that just involve going to work and making money, right? We want benefit, we want to enjoy it. And I think the unknown is, you never know what to expect. Yes, sir?
As CSO of Aflac, what kind of policies do you have in place to prevent something that would, like the attack that happened to Atlanta, not too long ago?
Yeah, and that's difficult, it is very difficult, and certainly I would never presume to say we solved that, right? Because, as soon as you do, the criminals change. So what happened in Atlanta, from what I know, and we still hadn't got intel, we will, as things come out. But from what I heard on the news is basically they fell for a ransomware type attack. They had some vulnerabilities that were identified that they did not fix. And that enabled the criminals to get ransomware in there, and then it propagated in their environment and kind of, made it inaccessible for them. Now, my understanding, the ransomware demand was for $50,000. I don't know if Atlanta paid it or not. Maybe they did, and the criminal didn't give them the keys or whatever. But thinking through that scenario, and we think through these scenarios all the time, the one is prevention, so make sure you have a strong vulnerability management program that not only takes vulnerabilities that are published by the manufacturer, but actually you have kind of a hunting team as well as tools and technology to go sweep your environment and find any vulnerabilities and then have them risk rated, And that's very important because there's always going to be more vulnerabilities than you can fix. But risk rate them and fix the ones that are critical and high very quickly. We have a requirement that a critical is fixed within, 72 hours, I think. Because a critical means that it's being executed, right? In other words, there's criminals out there exploiting that vulnerability, so that's why that's very important. So anyway, that's my understanding. That's one of the preventions. Also, we have a very good threat intelligence system and a threat analytics system. We actually so we gain intel from a whole lot of different sources. We ingest it into an analytics engine. It kind of churns, gives it kind of a risk rating, gives it a confidence factor, and then in some cases we actually automate the fix, so there's no human involvement. And we've had that in place for about 18 months, 2 years, and we've fixed over 36 million vulnerabilities automatically. That's not to count all the ones we do manually, but that's about all I can say. I could go back to my office and find out, or I wouldn't have to go back to my office. Someone could call me right now and say, you've just been breached, and unfortunately that's the life we live. Yes, sir.
All right, I have a very specific question. If you were going to tell somebody that transitioned from the military and then went to college, like the best way to get a job, what would you say?
Use all the resources available to you, especially transition programs. Every college I know, and I'm sure, although I hadn't experienced, CSU has a very good counseling program for job placement, I assume, Linda, but anyway. Take advantage of everybody. Take advantage of the people you know, the people your parents know, friends. Build a network, and use it. A lot of people have a network they don't even know about. And the truth is, right or wrong, people tend to hire people that they know, that if they don't know, they know somebody that knows them, especially in our field, right? You don't want to just hire strictly off the street. You want some kind of referencing. So if you know someone, it generally makes things easier. But, definitely be very good at articulating your skills, those skills you gained in the military as well as what you've gained in school. So one tells you education, the other one tells you experience. Make sure you combine those well and tell that story. I think every applicant ought to have a story. People respond much better to stories than just, transactional questions. But, have kind of a life story that you're willing to tell. And it should match your passion. So, that would be my advice. And anybody could disagree with that. Anything? Yes, sir.
Have you ever used like a bug bounty program or anything at Aflac?
we have that conversation quite frequently, and one of the guys that worked for me actually ran a security ops company, a SOC, and they used that, or they advocated that. I have a bit of a problem with a bug bounty program, and I know you can do it anonymously and things like that. The reason I get the feeling is you're giving people permission to hack you, right? And, part of everything we do in security is how does it play out? So, as I create the program, I go through the scenario that says, if I had to defend this in court, how would I defend this, right? How would I defend this decision? How would I defend why I didn't do something if I didn't do something? And then you also look at it as, if someone breaches me, are we making it hard to prosecute, should we decide to prosecute? And I kind of think the bug bounty programs are kind of like that. It's like, oh, we heard Aflac had a bug bounty program, so I wasn't hacking them. I was just looking for their bugs, So that's why I don't think it's a good idea. Companies like Google, the big companies, they could probably absorb that because, they're big, right? And I know that some of the technology companies do it, kind of for the same reason. But any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
How long did it take you to learn the Navy terminology?
Well, I had a crash course. I still don't know that I know it all, but it was about 2 weeks before. Then we got into knot tying class. My goodness, the Navy's got more knots than. But yeah, I speak Navy. I speak Marine. I served with the Marines for a while. Speak Army. We got lots of jokes about that. The old joke about the Navy and the Marines, that we used to, I don't know if it's a joke or not, but, the question is, why do you have the Marines? And that's, still debated all the time. And someone once told me it's to give the sailors somebody to dance with when they're aboard ship, but I have no knowledge of that. We're probably at time. Are we?
Any other questions? Well, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming to speak to our students. You did exactly what we really encourage our speakers to do, which is to share your own experience and what you have done in your career, and to talk about the things that have made a difference and how you got to where you are. I am sure that there are many students in this room who would love to have the opportunity to serve as the Chief Information Security Officer of a major corporation. And I just want to say thank you so much, because it's so meaningful, I think. I think it adds a very rich dimension to the educational experience to have people like you who are busy, I know, to come and take their time to really talk to students. So thank you so much. And this is a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to make an announcement. Does everybody in this room know what Thursday is? Student appreciation. Student appreciation, all right? Student appreciation was started in this college, I guess, about 8 years ago. And it is actually one of the most fun things that we do. We do a little small version of student appreciation in the building in the fall as a welcome back activity for students. But in the spring, we go all out. And so the whole purpose is to show our students that we, the faculty and the staff of the Turner College, we are here to serve you. You talked about servant leadership. We certainly see ourselves as being servant leaders. So the whole idea of Thursday, student appreciation, which by the way begins at noon or 12:30? Begins at 12:30 at the Mock Pavilion, which is right up on the hill, right by the soccer field, all right? The whole purpose of the event is for all of the faculty and all of the staff. They all come out and they find a way to engage with the students outside of the classroom. So you will find the faculty and the staff either cooking for you or serving you, or they do the check-in so that there are t-shirts for all business students, there are t-shirts for all computer science students, and we have a little fun with that, so we have the students to design the t-shirts. But what has become the real highlight of the event is what? The kickball game. And so every year, the faculty and staff take on the students. Now, does anybody in here know what the running, I guess the game tally is in terms of wins and losses? Anybody have any idea? Who do you think is ahead? Students, do you think? Well, I will have to admit, yes. Faculty, we went 5 years in a row losing. And so the 6th year we decided the only way that the faculty and staff stood a chance of winning was to cheat. So what they did was they got some graduate military officers in the MSOL program to come in and infiltrate the faculty staff team. We still lost. All right? Last year was the first year that the faculty won and faculty staff won, and we won legitimately. All right? So you all have your honor to defend. So make sure that you come out on Thursday. It will be fun. There's ice cream, there are hot dogs, there are hamburgers, there are prizes, there are t-shirts, but a lot of fun. And you will see a lot of your faculty members out having a really good time, and I assure you, many of them make real fools of themselves, which students tend to enjoy, including me. So I hope to see you on 12:30. Tim Callahan, thank you again, and thank you to your staff members that you brought with you, and thank you for the nice gifts. They brought the Aflac ducks, and they are if you notice that they are cybersecurity ducks. They're not just any ducks. This is probably something that you don't have a lot of, but it's a chance that you have a chance today to get a cybersecurity duck. Thank you for the gift. Thank you all.